Okay, moment three of Kant's Analytic of the Beautiful. So you should have noticed by now, at the end of every one of these four moments, as he calls them, they're really aspects, but he calls them moments of the judgments of taste, or his Analytic of the Beautiful. He has one sentence that contracts within itself the whole of what he's been saying within that moment. So those are the key sentences of the Analytic of the Beautiful. And again, the language is just really difficult to penetrate. Kant is trying to get inside and explain himself in the most detailed way. And so because of that, the language becomes quite convoluted and difficult. So your task should be twofold. First is to gravitate towards what's most important, and then take that and translate it into something that you can understand, into ordinary English. And for that, you need to paraphrase. So I'll try to do that for you as best I can in this third moment, and I'll keep it brief. You know, when you're doing what I just said, you have to let a lot go by. You can't pay attention to every little detail. What you want to do is get a hold of the key ideas. So the secret here then to moment three would be to look at the last sentence that I just mentioned that summarizes everything that he's been talking about in that moment. So the third moment, he says, beauty is the form of the purposiveness. Some people say purposiveness. That sounds a little awkward to me. Purposiveness or purposiveness, either way is fine. Of an object so far as it is presented in it without the representation of any purpose. Now that sounds really strange coming from a logician of the caliber of Immanuel Kant, who was a logic teacher and perhaps the epitome of rational knowledge thinking. It sounds like a contradiction. How can there be purposiveness without a purpose? So that's the idea that you have to get your head around. So let me see if I can help you to understand that. So he starts off at section 10, which is the beginning of the third moment of the Analytic of the Beautiful. And by the way, this third moment now is thinking about the beautiful in terms of relationship, of relations. The first one was the Analytic of the Beautiful with respect to quality, and that quality was disinterestedness. The second one was related to quantity, and that quantity is a universal. And now he's going to think about the beautiful with respect to the relations of things. So he wants to talk about purposiveness without purpose, which sounds like a contradiction. And in a way, it is a contradiction. But can there be such a thing as if there's a thing that has a purpose, but it doesn't have a purpose? So in what sense can something be purposiveness? There could be purposiveness about something, and there's really no purpose. So we need to think about that. So the first thing he does is define what he means by purpose. And so a purpose, he takes the idea of purpose from Aristotle. The purpose of something is the reason for which it exists. So if you have a chalice, like a silver chalice, and then it's used, let's say it was made to be used for the sacrament. So the whole purpose of the chalice is for the sake of the sacrament. So everything about the chalice is shaped on the basis of that. Or let's take something, a bodily organ, like the ears. The purpose of the ears are to hear. So the ears are constructed in such a way that they are conducive of hearing. That's why they're built the way they are. The hand to manipulate and so on. So a purpose is a concept, and it's that for which something is. Okay, so he defines it, purposiveness, that quality of purposiveness that he wants to talk about, is the causality of an object in respect of its causality of a concept. Like the concept is that for which something is, like hearing for the ears, seeing for the eyes. The first example I used was the sacrament for the chalice. So purposiveness is the cognition of an object, that is its form and existence, as an effect which is only possible by means of a particular concept. So he wants to really make clear that whenever you're talking about the purpose of something, there has to be a concept. But if you remember that the whole differentiation between the aesthetic judgment and many other things like cognitive judgments or judgments of the good is that it gives the beauty of something, evokes a pleasure or a satisfaction, and it's universal without a concept. Remember this concept of this idea of subjective universality. It's universal, but it's subjective. And it gives this universality without a concept. Okay. Usually things that are universal are objective and they have a concept. Remember I was explaining that if I say the room is square, you have the concept square, and then you can look at people can look at the room. If the room is in fact square, and everybody has this concept of square, then that becomes universally valid statement. But if I say something is beautiful, I assume that others will find it beautiful. There's a universality, but it's a state of mind that I'm talking about. It's not, the beauty is not in the object. The object is evoking a particular state of mind, and I speak as though the beauty were in the object. So whenever you talk about purpose, there has to be a concept, because the purpose of something is a concept. Now, with regard to the faculty of desire, he says, which is connected with our will, that's not hard to understand. When we desire something, we will. That I desire to accomplish something, so I will it. With regard to the faculty of desire, it acts in conformity with a concept, and hence is its purpose. One's will desires a particular end. But for Kant, there can also be a kind of purposiveness without purpose. This can be only insofar as one does not place the cause of this form in the will. So he wants to take the idea of purposiveness, keep that, but detach it from any concepts or from any desire. Remember, it's disinterested, so there can't be any desires, and it has to be satisfying and universal without a concept. So he has to eliminate. He wants to preserve purposiveness of some of the judgments of the beautiful, but take it out of the realm of concepts and the realm of desire. So, what is this purposiveness without a purpose? He goes on in section 11. The judgment of taste has nothing at its basis but the form of purposiveness. So perhaps the example I used earlier about the eyes. Someone could have very beautiful eyes, but the eyes don't see that well. So the beauty is based on the shape of the eyes. For Kant, it's not in color. We'll have to talk about that in a minute. He calls that charm. He wants to take the purposiveness without purpose outside of the realm of charm and emotion. So somebody, for Kant, somebody has beautiful eyes because those eyes have a particular form to them. And the eyes were made to see, but seeing is a concept. So if you take the seeing part out, and if you take your own desires out of the equation, when you look at someone with beautiful eyes, and you're not desiring them in any way, you're just looking at them like an artist might look at somebody with beautiful eyes, with a kind of detached withinness, a disinterested appreciation. Then you would pay attention to the form of the eyes, independent of their ability to see. Okay, so it has to do. It looks like it has a purpose, but there's no purpose. The best example I what helped me to understand this concept was in music. There are certain passages in music, especially music that has no words. They call that absolute music for some reason. The words can be part of it, but if you're concentrating on the words, then you're not paying attention as much to the form. Kant is a formalist when it comes to art and beauty. So there's a passage in music. Well, let's take Beethoven. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. You know, there's so that looks like it has a purpose. And there may be a purpose that Beethoven, after the fact, ascribed to that, like the unity of all human beings, and or so on. Well, that was another symphony. Bum 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 dun da 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 do 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 do, and we could go on. So there's something about that melody that sounds like it has a very purpose. It's very definitive. It knows what it wants to do. It all fits together in a particular way. But in the end, there's no purpose. Okay, so or a rose, you could think of a rose. It has this particular shape. Now, Kant wouldn't concentrate on the color or the smell or anything like that. Those he associates with charm. And he wants to eliminate, he wants to play down, not play down, he wants to say the more that charm plays a part, like you like these roses because they're red, that appeals to a particular idiosyncrasy. That's more of a, remember, a judgment of the pleasant, and it's pertaining to our senses. And so he calls that charm. So later on, he's going to detach the beauty judgments from charm and from emotion too. He wants to concentrate on the form. So purposiveness without purpose means that it has a particular form and it looks like it has a purpose, but there's no purpose. Okay, it's a way of speaking about good form. That's why I chose a film for you to think about in terms of dance. Of course, you can watch someone dance and there could be some purpose to the dance that will feed the plot. Okay, but the plot itself is purposeless. There's no purpose to the plot besides the very beauty of its form. So for Kant, art and beauty, the beauty of art and the beauty of nature have to do with the form. Okay. So he says it, the determining ground of the judgment of taste is the subjective purposiveness without any purpose, and hence the mere form of purposiveness. Okay, that's why I was talking, the very shape of the ears, the very shape of the eyes, the very movement of the dance, the very shape of the, now, of course, a rose, for example, the parts of the rose can have purposes. There's the stamen, there's the pistil. I don't know enough about botany, but a botanist may look at a rose and look at it as a botanist. Okay, and they may show the function of different, the purpose of these different parts of the rose. The petals are used for, the rose is using the thorns are keeping, you know, critters away and preserving it. You know, that's a defense, you know, for the rose. That's what, you know, that's why it's thorny. But if one, what Kant is talking about is it's not the thing that he's talking about. He's talking about the aesthetic judgment. It's talking about the relation that we have with things when we see them as beautiful. What are the conditions that make possible our beauty judgments? So purposiveness without purpose, that's the key to, and that's the key to this whole moment. He writes, the pleasantness without interest in the existence of the object, that's the disinterested pleasure that he's talking about, attained in the reflection of taste. The judgments of taste he calls the reflective judgment. And he wants to speak of our relation to beauty is we contemplate beauty, is in no way practical, either in the sense of being merely pleasant or in the rational law. In other words, he's constantly differentiating beauty judgments from judgments of the pleasant, which are based on our desires and on the idiosyncrasies of our own unique individuality. And he's separating it from the concept, from concepts. Nevertheless, it involves causality, a causality which affects a maintaining of the state of the representation itself, of lingering over the beautiful. I like this. Sometimes he touches on really important things, and I wish he would develop it more. But there's a lingering that, have you ever noticed, like when you see something beautiful or hear it or experience it in any way, the more you attend to it, the more it starts giving, and the more, sometimes we see something beautiful and then we pass on. But if you could just stop and linger there for a while and allow it, linger is the best word. There's another word I'm looking for. Marvel, and to marvel in it and hang in there for a while. Just don't see it and then move on. The longer you linger there, the more it starts giving, if it's truly beautiful. So Kant is saying the reason we linger over the beautiful as we contemplate the beautiful is that the faculties are enhancing one another, and you're experiencing this disinterested satisfaction. And there's a kind of enhancement of the faculties. So that state is, there's this function, this relation of the imagination and the understanding that are working in such a way that it provokes one to linger and to marvel. Section 13, what that's all about is separating, I mentioned this already in passing, but he wants to play down the elements of charm and emotion in our experience of the beautiful. And not just play it down, but give reasons why. The more charm or emotion play a part, and you can disagree with this. People, I'm not asking you to agree or disagree. I'm just trying to help you understand it first, which is the first step. You can remember that too, by the way. Whenever you're trying to understand something, it's probably best not to disagree with it before you understand it. And then once you feel like you got a handle on something, then, of course, critical thinking, that's after you interpret something, you want to evaluate it. So he plays down what he calls charm and emotion. Charm, of course, words take on different meanings by different people and everything. So we want to get to the meaning. What does he mean by charm? And by charm, he means whatever appeals to the five senses and gratification of the desires of the five senses. So like somebody may like the sound of wind instruments and somebody may like the sound of stringed instruments. So the more charming, somebody may just love the sound of the violin. So when they hear any violin sounds, they're more apt to call it beautiful. So what's important for Kant is not the timbre of the violin or It doesn't matter if it's a violin or a guitar or wind instrument or whatever instrument it is. What matters is the form. And so charm is anything that's related to the five senses and the fulfilling of the desires of the five senses. And emotion is what it means to everyone. Feeling, by emotion, he thinks emotion, the way he defines emotion is, emotion for Kant is not an element, is not an element of the judgments of beauty. He defines emotion as the pleasantness produced in the sublime, in the momentary checking and hence of a powerful, like, catharsis or outflow of our vital forces. It's like a repression and then a catharsis. It's like, there's something to that, actually. When you feel emotion, there's a kind of holding back, and then a kind of burst into tears or laughter or whatever feeling that you happen to be feeling. For Kant, this plays, the more emotion enters into the beauty judgment, the less pure it is. And the more charm plays a part, the less pure it is. Now, that leads him to his next point. Well, no, there's something in between, and then he goes into mixed and pure beauties. But before he does that, he talks about perfection. Some people think that an artwork is beautiful, or something in nature is beautiful because it's perfect. It leaves nothing to be desired. There's something perfect in that. Well, Kant disagrees with that position, because purpose has perfection has always a purpose. Like, if we say something is perfect, then we have already assumed what that thing is for. So there's this purpose, and there's a concept there. And then that thing there's a judgment about whatever that is, and we say, oh, it's perfect. It's a perfect automobile, or a perfect horse, perfect racehorse, perfect dog, whatever. So whenever you're thinking about something being perfect, then there's a concept that you're using as a gauge, and you're judging to what degree this thing rises up and participates in that ideal. So it's not about the perfection of something that makes it beautiful. And then if there's any definite concept, he says, the judgment of taste by which an object is declared to be beautiful under the condition of a definite concept is not pure. So that leads him to talk about pure and dependent beauties. There are two kinds of beauties. What he calls free beauties and dependent beauties. But again, we have to keep reminding ourselves, that the beauty is not in the object for Kant. It's always in the subject. It's a state of mind. The object is just evoking that. So if an object evokes this, if a judgment is pure, then he calls that judgment of the beautiful a free beauty. And if it's not pure, if it's mixed with what? With concepts, with interest, with a concept of perfection or whatever, or any concept like knowledge, the more knowledge plays a part in it, it becomes mixed. Now, this leads to a very important point. To what is and a lot of people have strong feelings about this, especially art historians who make a whole living teaching people about art. when we experience beauty, and it could be beauty in nature too, not natural beauties, not just artworks where there's no artist, like in nature, where God is the artist. There can be, or in art, actually, works of art. Does knowing more about art enhance your experience? I went for years under Kant's sway because I was so taken by his separating the realm of cognitive judgments from judgments of taste. I still agree with Kant on that point, that I was like a purist about that. I thought the more we bring in knowledge, the less our the diminished, the more diminished our experience of the beauty would be. Since then, I've really softened up, but I've sort of compromised without doing any injustice to Kant, I think, because see, the more you know about art, let's say, and I took a lot of art history, actually. I took the first course, and then I loved it so much, I took the 3 courses when I was an undergraduate that art majors take, so in the history of art. But since then, I've lived a long time now, and I've made it a point to go to these places and see them firsthand. And learn when you go there too. There are guides all over the place. And before I would go, I would learn, about things. So all this knowledge that you take, does that detract from? Because Kant was saying, when you have an experience of the beauty of something, it has nothing to. It's related to concepts, but there's a free play going on between the imagination and understanding. Well, I've come to the my final position on that, at least the way I feel about it now. It does enhance, I would say, but there still needs to be this free play. So the beauty is not based on the knowledge. That's where I agree with Kant. Your experience of the beauty of something is not based on the knowledge you have of that. So you could know so much about seashells, for example, about all the different kinds, about how the seashells are like the homes of different kinds of clams and critters and different sea urchins and whatever. You can know all about that, and and not see the beauty of the seashell, like a little child sitting on the shore, staring and marveling at a seashell. But at the same time, the more you know about art and the more you know about nature, that enhances, that gives you more to work with in that free play between the imagination and the understanding. Like when I was looking at the Taj Mahal, knowing that Shah Jahan, when he made that, brought Italians there to do this process of pietra dura, it's called, where they take semi-precious gems like lapis lazuli or jade, and not diamonds and emeralds, but semi-precious gems, coral, things like that. And they embossed it. They made patterns inside the Taj Mahal, which made it incredibly beautiful. So when I was looking at that and marveling at that, I could imagine these Italians doing that and making that, or, and so that can become part of the free play that's going on between my imagination, my understanding. So I would probably agree with art historians that the more you know about art, it would enhance your experience, or the more you know about the natural world. But I would still maintain with Kant that the experience of beauty of it is aesthetic. So if you're going into art history, or Walsh University has this major in museum studies and so on, I would definitely recommend a course in aesthetics, or in the philosophy of art, which I teach here. And because the experience, the aesthetic experience, is more than knowledge. This is the place where most people who haven't thought about it or read anything about it, they make their mistake. The common person who travels, for example, I don't know what percentage, but the multitudes of people, they think they're supposed to learn a lot. So it just becomes like you're in, it's like you're in school again. So anyhow, that's a little digression. So what is the free beauty and what's the dependent beauty? Well, again, the beauty is not in the thing, it's in subjectivity. So if in subjectivity there's the judgment is not based on concepts or desire or interest or purpose or uh, purpose with not purposiveness without purpose. That's something else. So then it's a free beauty. And he gives examples like seashells. He mentioned that. So again, it's not the seashell itself, because the seashell does have a purpose. It's the home of these sea critters, who live like clams and things, and different animals that live in the sea. But if one is looking at the seashell aesthetically, then that's not what the beauty is based on. It's based on the form of the shell, not even the colors for Kant. And this is where I disagree with him, because I think he separates form from content. And I think that's a false dichotomy. That's my own critique of Kant's critique of judgment. You can't really separate color, for example, from form. When artists paint something, they don't make a drawing and then color it in like children do with coloring books. Those coloring books are bad for children, actually, because they make you think that you draw something and then you color it in. The color itself, the paint, the color is the outline of something. They don't separate form from content, but Kant does. In content, the colors and the timbre of sounds and so on, that he relegates to charm, and he wants to play that down. So there are free and dependent beauties. The free beauty presupposes no concept of the purpose of the object. And he's got two kinds of purposes, internal purpose or external. It depends how nitty gritty you want to get with Kant. I'm not going to ask you to go deep into every little idea. I just want you to get the big idea. And the big idea from this section, the third moment, is purposiveness without purpose. You want to try to get your head around that. And the way I understand it is it's the form. It's just a way of talking about good form, the movement and the shape of things. So free beauties presuppose no concept of the purpose of the object, of what the object ought to be in its perfected state, for example, under a given concept. The second, that is dependent beauty, does presuppose such a concept, and hence presupposes the perfection of the object in accordance with a concept. Like we could look at a shell, let's say I'm a botanist, or I'm a oceanographer or something, and I look at a shell, and I know a lot about shells and what creature lived in this shell and so on and so forth. But also at the same time, I'm a human being and I love shells and I see the beauty of it. So now I look at a seashell. Well, for Kant, that experience would be a mixed beauty or dependent beauty, because I'm thinking about, and I think to myself, well, it's beautiful, but look how perfect it is. It's a perfect example of a particular, animal. He would call that a dependent beauty because you're mixing it. It's being mixed with the concept of perfection. So he wants you to, what Kant is asking us to do is that when we behold something beautiful, whether it be a work of art or whether it's in nature, he wants you to just let it be and look at the form. Don't think about what it is or whatever. Don't try to analyze it. Don't try to find out. Don't be thinking about. Don't let your experience be determined about how perfect it is, insofar as it rises up to some concept of perfection. Don't try to analyze it in terms of all the knowledge you have. You know, just let it be, and let your imagination play freely with your understanding, and allow it to create a harmony in your subjectivity, and linger there and feel that feeling. It's a feeling. It's a particular feeling, a particular kind of feeling. Now, no two people are going to feel the same way in the presence of the same thing, but the faculties are going to experience a similar kind of harmonious state, an enhancement and a free play between the imagination and the understanding. Let me try to explain one more time how this free play works. See, normally, if the imagination is not playing a part, and I keep going back to the Taj Mahal because that was a very moving. Let me come up with a different example. There's another place in India that really it's equally important as the Taj Mahal aesthetically. It's called the temples of Khajuraho. And I went there, and they're awesome. It's incredible. And they're very erotic too at the same time. And I learned a lot about these temples, why they were built and so on, and the philosophy underneath it. And I could go on and on about all that. And that did enhance my experience. But as I was there, since I knew that there were temples, there were Hindu temples that were used to as religious precincts, where there would be like dancing and certain rituals that were very unlike. They're not orgies or anything like that, or anything like that, but they're very erotic dancing that would take place. But for religious purposes, that's hard for a Western mind to get their head around. Usually, religion and sensuality and sexuality are never combined. But in Tantric Hindu, they are. Well, if you think about it, sex is the origin of all life, and God is the origin of all life. So there might be some connection between sexuality and divinity. But we don't. I don't need to go off on a big thing about that. So anyhow, I knew a lot about this, the people who built these in the Tantric religion at the basis of this and everything. So as I'm there, as my imagination, knowing that, it helped my imagination to play freely with the understanding. But if I were to respond to those temples strictly as an art historian, then I would not be allowing the free play to take place. Like if I say these temples were built by the people of the Kushan period of Indian history, as I'm staring at these marvelous temples. You can check them out on YouTube, by the way. There's some good photos by professional photographers, but there's nothing like being there. I mean, being there is the whole thing. But you can, at least you can, see from pictures. If you're responding purely as an art historian, then Kant would say, you're not going to experience the beauty of the temples. Now, there are these places in between. That's what the dependent beauties are, where you're able to see the beauty of something and experiencing it in this disinterested way. But at the same time, since you know so much, you're bringing in a lot of knowledge, or you're basing it on charm, or you're basing it on some other kind of interest, like erotic interest or whatever. Then Kant is saying that's polluting the experience, because charm, emotion, concepts are all alien to the aesthetic experience, aesthetic judgment. Now, that word alien is quite strong. Again, I want to qualify. It's not that the more you know about art, or the more you know about nature, the more diminished your ability to behold the beauty of something will be. I used to think that way, and I've softened a lot since then. I do think that it enhances your experience. But I do believe also with Kant that the experience of beauty and the satisfaction one gains from beholding and contemplating something beautiful is not based on knowledge. If it were, then again, I always go back to I can't get over this example. I don't know, and people don't seem to be too moved by it, but why even go anywhere? Why go to the museum then? Why not just go to the library? Or you don't have to do that now with the Google. You just Google it, and then you can see the Taj Mahal. There it is. So why would anyone go to India and go through all of that? It's like you're going to be in the 27 hours later, and then you're going to have to take 2 days just to get over the trip, and then make your way to Agra. Good luck with that. And then find a place to stay. Good luck with that too. And find yourself some pure water. Not just pure water. You can get sick on pure water. You have to get boiled water. Purified one. It can't even say pure. If it has to say purified. Anyhow, I'm just trying to be funny, but it's true what I'm saying. Why would anyone go through all that to see the Taj Mahal when? If it's all based on knowledge, then just read about it. Read a book on the Taj Mahal. I'm sure there are fine books. See, the very fact there's a big difference between the direct experience of beauty and reading about it or looking at a picture of it tells me that the experience of beauty is not based on knowledge. If it were, then there's no reason to be in its presence. You just learn about it. And I'll tell you, I have traveled a lot, and I'm glad I did that. It really made my life fulfilling. I don't have a real strong desire to travel because I feel like I've gone just about everywhere. I wouldn't mind a few more places before, my time has come. But I have been I have seen this firsthand among people who travel. And not everyone, of course, not everyone, but most people, the common people. There are travelers who are savvy too. There's some people who know about how to be around art and so on and beauty. But most people think they're supposed to learn about things. They go on road trips to learn things. Like, and that's okay. You can do that, but you're not going to see the beauty of anything that way. So he calls those dependent beauties. A free beauty would be, for instance, a seashell. It's beautiful in itself. It does not belong to any object with regard to purpose under a concept. It pleases freely in itself. It is formally pleasing. To be sure, the seashell could be conceived of as having a purpose, and its beauty could be thought to as having merely ancillary status. However, for Kant, only free beauties are pure. Dependent beauties bring in concepts, desires, interest, perfection, all the things. So don't worry too much about that last section where he talks about the ideal of beauty. So the main thing about this is that beauty is the form of the purposiveness of an object so far as it is perceived without any representation of a purpose. So you have to try to get your head around this apparent contradiction, purposiveness without purpose. And for me, it wasn't that hard of a thing when I start thinking about music or dance, especially music without, they call this absolute music. I don't know why they call it that, but music without words. Now, some music without words is programmatic. They call it programmatic music, like Vivaldi's four seasons. You can hear the four seasons, but you have to really stretch it. I mean, okay, this is winter, this is fall, and there's some concept there, but the beauty of Vivaldi's four seasons is not based on how representative each season rises up to the actual season, like how close springtime is to spring. You know, you need to allow your, and this is a good example maybe of Vivaldi's Four Seasons. If you're thinking solely in terms of how each of these four seasons replicates the season, like spring replicates really spring, then to that extent, you're not allowing the free play to go on between your understanding and your imagination. Now, there's nothing wrong with thinking about, oh yeah, as you're listening to the music, you may hear the bursting forth in your mind, you may picture actually the bursting forth of plants, you know, in springtime, you know, the coming forth of new life in the spring. And I would even think of the word primavera. I always love that word. It means first truth, and that's the Italian word for springtime. So that may happen, that may go on in my mind as I'm listening to Vivaldi's season, the Four Seasons. That's okay, Kant is saying. That's going to be part of the free play between the imagination and the understanding. But of course, if you listen to music, it's not representing anything, or dance. Now, like in the film Singing in the Rain, when Gene Kelly is dancing, I'm sure it plays a part in enhancing the plot. I mean, he looks, I haven't seen the movie yet. I may watch it tonight, actually. But I just saw that one scene. I was really smitten by it. So he looks like he just fell in love. And he's full of that feeling. Now, Kant would play that part down, you know, the emotion, the charm, you know, he would want us to just concentrate on the sheer movement of his body. But there may be some purpose of that dance that it would move the plot forward in some way. I'm sure it does. It fits into the film as a whole. And the film has a plot. It looks like he's in love. He just fell in love, and he's feeling good about that. And he's feeling this rush. And so he's singing in the rain, right? That feeling of abandonment, not abandonment, not abandonment. That's a Freudian. Not abandonment. What is the word? Abandon. Yeah, that feeling of abandon. And, you know, that one feels when young love. So it pushes the plot forward, but the plot itself is purposelessness without purpose. You know, a plot of a film is not replicating any. There was never a man, you know, who sang in the. I mean, sure, people did sing in the rain, but he's not trying to replicate anybody, any historical figure who sang this in the rain, and he's trying to get it right, right? And the whole film is fiction, you know. But so its beauty resides on its form and the way it all fits together, how the parts all fit together. So basically, Kant's idea of beauty here is the classic notion of good form. It's the form of purposiveness without a purpose. It looks like it has a purpose, but there's no purpose. So music, dance, seashells, you know, the ripples of water coming in, those kind of things in art and nature lend themselves to being free beauties. So it's good to know, knowledge is an important thing, and I'm a man of knowledge. I've spent my whole life in the realm of knowledge. But there are certain times where we need to take that knowledge and put it in its proper place. And what Kant is saying is that this is one of those places when you're contemplating the beauty of something. Don't try to reduce it to knowledge. There's a big difference between a cognitive judgment and an aesthetic judgment. I'll make one more short film on lecture on the last moment, and then I'll summarize the different kinds of judgments there are. And I'll do that next time. All right.